Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress, and welcome to today's webinar, the IDEs of March, presented by DevExpress Technical Evangelist Paul Usher. He'll take us through some cool tips for using DevExpress tools inside the Visual Studio IDE. Regardless of the technology, there are a number of impressive designers, scaffolding wizards, and helpers to make your development experience a productive one. And again, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Paul Usher.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning to everyone. Welcome to the IDE'S of March inside Visual Studio with DevExpress. It's actually the IDEs of March because, to be technical, the IDEs refer to the 15th. But since that fell on a weekend, we decided not many people would want to turn up. So what's today all about? Well, it's certainly not about this. This is the scene depicting where Julius Caesar is stabbed, having not heeded his warning about March. Instead, it's more about this. Visual Studio, the tool that we all love to use, and how here at DevExpress we've been able to enhance productivity and make our lives easier as developers with some really cool tools and helpers. Now, I'm going to take you through some of the key technologies and highlight some of those helpers and wizards, and also take a look at things like CodeRush and where that can be a big productivity boost. We'll start with the DevExpress template gallery because on talking to some developers, they weren't completely aware of some of the functionality inside here. The first thing, if I choose the 13.2 version, you'll see that it exposes any other versions that I've got installed side by side. Now, the important thing here is that if I create a template or project based on a different library, it will correctly reference the library that I've selected, which is really, really nice. The next thing is selecting the language. So I can switch between Visual C# and Visual Basic. And then, of course, there's a platform selector where I get to choose looking at all the templates or narrowing it down by a particular technology. On the WinForms one that we can see on screen, you'll notice that there is an item in blue. This represents the fact that there's a further wizard to help as we go through. That aside for a second, we could create a blank application based on toolbars or ribbons, or go through and use one of the skeleton applications that we provide. And there's some really powerful functionality in those out of the box, whether it be an Outlook-inspired one, or some data mapping, pivot grids and charts, or the word processing. There's lots to choose from. But today we're going to focus on those extra little bits, the helpers that make life even easier. So I'm going to go ahead and select the project wizard. Now, once this is in place, the first thing I get to do is select what type of window I want my project to be based on. And that can be the extra form in all its glory, or it could be a ribbon form, or even just a vanilla form. I can then select what I want to interact with in my command area. Do I want a ribbon, basic toolbars, or nothing at all? And then I've got the navigation section on the left-hand side there. Do I want a nav bar, a tree list, or nothing at that part of the UI? And then finally, the all-important client area. And here I get to select from any of the larger controls in the suite, such as the spreadsheet control or the powerful grid control. For now, I'm going to focus on the layout manager because there's a couple of things that I found are hidden nuggets inside that particular control. Now, because Visual Studio can take a little while to spin some of these up, I've actually created them ready so we can move along. Now, what we've got here is a basic application featuring the layout control, the ribbon, and the nav bar. So if I was to run this, we can see I've got pre-built buttons. I can switch between different skins nice and easily, so the gallery controls there. I've got the splitter control in place and the collapsible nav bar, etc. So it's really quite a nice starting point. Back inside the IDE, let's take a look at some of the helpers that make our lives certainly a lot easier. And we'll start with the smart tag. When we click the smart tag, it's going to give us direct access to some of the basic properties. So in this case, we have a text box. We could change the text property. If we look at the Memo control, bring up the smart tag, I could set the line count, scroll bars, etc. But there's one thing here that I think is a really powerful tool, and that is the ability to change the editor type. So instead of being a standard text box, I can come down and I can make it, for example, a date edit. If I expose the properties window, we'll see that that's been made a date edit in the extra editor's namespace. If I bring the smart tag back up, the smart tag has also been updated to reflect that change. From here, I can access key elements such as changing the calendar view, and let's say make it a touch UI. So now when I run the application, without writing or without having to go through and find properties nested inside controls, I've now got a beautiful formatted date control that's been specially designed for touch UI. So if I was on a touchscreen laptop or something similar, I've got that nice rich interface. The next thing inside the WinForms demo here is the layout control. Now, I find that this control is one of those that it's in the toolbox. You might have come past it now and then, but you haven't really had a good look at it. And it's such a powerful little tool. Effectively, if I bring up the customized layout window, what we can see is the ability to drag text boxes or other controls simply into the layout control. It will take care of the positioning, it will take care of the resizing and everything to do with that UI element. So in this case, if we scroll down a little bit, we can see a business panel where we've got the obligatory company details, etc., etc. I wouldn't have to sit here and position them all. The layout control is going to do that for me. And it's a great example how we can interact with the design environment to make a developer's life that little bit easier. We can bring up the customized dialog, we can rename the control, we can change all sorts of properties on the fly without having to go delving into the properties window or manually setting things. Now, as I brought up the context menu there, let's just see what happens if I bring up the context menu on a standard control. We've got the ability to select the control or one of its surrounding controls. I could bring up the About panel for my DX subscription. There's also a cool feature which says Learn More Online. Now this applies to all controls. If I click that, it's going to take me across to the support center and show me all the knowledge base articles or information about the specific control that I selected. So here we have the text edit control, which is really handy if you're looking for some specific information or want to access the online documentation. While we're talking about context menus, if I right-click in the Properties window, I've got this option here, which is Add DevExpress Item. And it's a shortcut way to gain access to the template gallery, which is then set up specifically for the child or the same type of items inside the project. So I'm in a WinForms, I can quickly have access to a user control or an additional form or splash screen. I've got quick access to the reporting and also the dashboards. So another way that we help get some of the laborious tasks out of the way. When we're working with some of the larger elements, such as the ribbon, might be the navbar, and certainly the grid control, which I'll show in a second, we can invoke the designer. Now, all the designers have a common look and feel, so that once you work through one of them, you should be able to easily navigate through any of them. When it comes to the ribbon, there are so many features and functions you can implement, so the designer is there to take the pain away. Very quickly, I can visualize, I can see exactly what buttons are in what groups. I can set up access to quick toolbars. I can look at my reduce operations or my gallery controls. Everything is done in a nice, clear, visual way to allow me to get on with my job. Exactly the same applies for the navbar designer. Again, familiar look and feel allows me to go through and just start playing around with the different properties that I might want. I have another form in the background here, which is the grid control. Again, just to show you that the smart tag is the important starting point. I could use it to connect to my data source, I can invoke the designer dialog from here. Once in here, I've got access to all the key elements. So from a productivity point of view, it's really, really helping. Now, how would that apply in something like the ASP world? Well, if we were to take a look at the DevExpress template gallery for ASP.NET, and it applies for both MVC and Webforms, we can see again we've got a myriad of starter templates available, and these are designed to shortcut some of that setup process. I mentioned that there'd be something blue to nominate that there's a project wizard behind it. So here in the MVC one, we've got the web application, and then the same inside Webforms with both the tablet and the web application. If I launch that, I'm going to get prompted for the project name, and then I can actually say run the wizard. Now there's only one panel difference between the MVC wizard and the Webforms wizard, so we'll run through both together. But effectively, here we can see the fact that we can control the header and footer information, the left and right client areas, or navbar areas, and the client area. If I move along to the MVC settings, we can see we can choose the engine that we want to do, either the SPX view engine or the Razor engine, what version of MVC we want, and whether we want to incorporate unit tests. I get to choose a theme or incorporate themes from an external library, so I don't have to go anywhere, it's all incorporated in the wizard. I've got the site configuration options, which allow me to control the authentication model, as well as the compression options inside the DX control settings, and of course the localization options. So when I create that project, I end up with something that's usable straight off the bat. Now what I'm going to do is switch to a pre-built Webforms version and just have a look. Here we've got a master page in place with our grid control, and we've got the all-important smart tag. When I choose the smart tag, again I've got direct access to the things that are important. I don't have to go looking for this information. So I could say show edit, show new, or show delete. And we're seeing those changes in real time back onto the grid. But of course, not everybody wants to be doing this inside the Visual Designer. So I'll switch through to my source view, and here I am inside my HTML. I'm going to choose the ASPX grid view here, and I've got a smart tag. If I click that, I've got the same powerful access to information directly inside my source view, so I can quickly do that. Now, while I'm inside the source view here, I want to do one little thing from CodeRush, and we'll look at CodeRush in a little bit more detail. But basically, if I say T and tab, something strange happens on screen. First of all, in the bottom right-hand side, I get a window saying Set Table Dimensions. And then just underneath where I press T, I have table size. And by simply using my left and down or right and down arrow keys, I can change the table size that's going to be inserted. I even get warnings to say, hey, you're about to insert an inordinately large amount of data or cells into this. It's not really normal. So I'll come back and just do a small table. And we can see that CodeRush, using the templating, has inserted that straight into my code for me, allowing me to then tab between and set the key elements. All these things are designed to increase productivity. If I'm working inside the MVC framework, I'll switch over to that. Here we've got a grid partial view, or we'll switch to the index view, doesn't matter. But we've got a view that we're working inside Visual Studio. Now obviously there is no visual designer when it comes to MVC, but what we've been able to do is allow you to work with our extensions in a really quick fashion. Simply invoke the context menu, so right click and come down to the Insert DevExpress MVC extension. This will then bring up the extension wizard. And quite literally, I can click on any one of the DevExpress extensions here, set some properties, and then say Insert. And it's going to insert that directly into my code window. Now that one there was obviously a humble button. If I bring that up again and say, have a look at what data extensions we have. And it may be that I want to interact with a grid view. I get to come through and set all the properties. It's going to make sure, as we can see with this model type required option here, that everything is filled in as I need to. And this applies to every extension that we have. As we step through, it's going to ask for all the properties that you might need to set, including the ability to embed reports, scheduling, and charts. So it's really, really powerful and time-saving when it comes down to it. Now, DevExtreme is a HTML JavaScript option, and it was not left out when it came to making things productive. Straight off the bat, we can see the new project wizard inside Visual Studio, which has given me a number of different options. It's going to let me create a blank application, multi-channel application, and some OData service wizards. But if I step through and say I want a multi-channel application, the first thing we'll notice is I get to pick very quickly what platforms I want to target. So I can say web and mobile. I even get to nominate what programming language I want, whether it be JavaScript or TypeScript. As I step through the wizard, it allows me to make smart choices about my design, about what I want to produce in a visual way. So I don't have to start sitting there thinking, what's it going to look like? And then finally, if I'm building something that talks to an OData service, it will actually generate the necessary classes to do the fetching and the updating of those records, all within that level entry wizard. What you end up with inside Visual Studio is a design surface that allows you to visually drag and drop widgets and elements onto it. So whilst it is a HTML-based technology, what we've been able to bring into Visual Studio brings that visual aspect back. Not only that, but when you run an application, you're going to end up with a WYSIWYG simulator, which allows you to switch between the different devices. It's going to allow you to look at how it's going to render. All these things are designed to make our lives a lot easier when dealing with the different technologies. And then finally with DevExtreme, if we go to deploy a package, we've got a wizard there to help us along the way. All we'd need to do would be to pick a deployment, say Android. It's then going to step me through what I need to do, so creating a certificate file if I don't have one, and then build the package ready to ship directly to the store or to an enterprise deployment. And then we have the all-important CodeRush, which I think streamlines productivity and certainly allows me as a developer to focus on what I need to, which is my code. Now, CodeRush supports things like auto-declarations, refactoring, code issues, templates, selection tools, and even a humble color picker. So what we'll do is jump over to Visual Studio and take a quick look at some of the functions that CodeRush can deliver. I'll switch to the correct project. Okay, so I mentioned the color picker, and it might seem like a simple thing, but if we declare a color and just call it sample, and to start with we'll just say color.blue. Now, because CodeRush is installed inside the IDE, straight away you'll see the color that is represented inside the IDE. What's really nice here is I can click on the color, and then the CodeRush color selection comes up, and I get to pick what I want. Obviously, I can go through a specific picker. I can look at all the different options inside here. I can choose a system color. I can even have my own favorites. I'm going to choose a nice green, click OK, and that's reflected straight back into the IDE, and the color is updated. So that's really, really nice. The next thing is the auto declaration. Now, this is some powerful stuff. So I'm going to uncomment this code. If you're new to CodeRush, everything that you do is explained. So there's no special magic happening that you're wondering what's going on. The other really nice thing if you're learning CodeRush is the fact that you can come up to the DevExpress menu, CodeRush, Tool Windows, and CodeRush, and turn on the training window. Now what this will do is every time you are in the IDE typing, it will analyze what keystrokes you're typing and give you the best assistance based on a context-sensitive engine that was built in. Now what we've got here is a basic method called create superhero. It talks about setting some properties, so we've got a hero name, an alias, and a weight. And then we've got a class called hero and a class called mortal. And then we're doing something down here as far as checking for stay away from water. But of course, none of these elements exist yet. So this is really, really cool when it comes to test-driven development or code first. For example, I can come down to mortal and I can invoke the CodeRush menu. And I can simply say, declare class with properties. Now what the CodeRush engine is going to do is it's going to look through and say, I'm going to create a new class called mortal based on everything that's required. We start out by having the fact that we've got sidekick name, and I'm going to change that just to the word name. And you'll see straight away that because of the object linking, where name was required, it gets changed everywhere. If I press escape, I'm going to jump back to where I was. Here we've got an enumerator called element. Now element can have kryptonite, it can have hydrogen, it can have oxygen, but of course it doesn't exist yet. So what I'm going to do is click on element, invoke the CodeRush menu, and say declare enum. Again, it's gone through and created this enum now called element. So if I jump back, pressing the marker collect key, and I can do exactly the same thing with hero. Invoke, declare class with properties, and it's going to come through. You'll see if I highlight this field here called hero name, I want to change it just to name, and as I'm doing that, it knows where all the other places in the code are, and it's naming it correctly. And then finally inside this little example is the fact that we've got this method here. We want to move this away from the declaration, so I can highlight the code, invoke refactor, and I can see that when it comes to refactoring, I've got some options such as extract method, and if I was to choose that, we'll see the red arrow appear and say where do you want the method to be extracted. I can do that, and we can see now it's created a call passing in hero up to my new method. But it may be that I actually want that inside the class, so instead I can say extract method to hero, and it's going to give me that example. You can see clearly what's going to happen to your code before it happens. So if I choose extract method to hero, it's again asking me whereabouts in the hero class I want to pop that. I'll say here. I'm just going to leave the name as is for now, just as an example. But if I jump back to my main code, we can see that it's now calling the method on the class. Some other quick things with CodeRush inside the IDE. I love the method or the icon identifiers. It's clear to see that this is a class and that we've got our methods, etc. I can click on this and very quickly change the visibility. I can select a whole method. With a mouse click, I can comment out a whole method. If I want to use the CodeRush key to uncomment things, I can do so. Now, you'll notice also I've got things on the left-hand side show me things such as line count, cyclomatic complexity, and maintenance. And it's very important if we're wanting to write clean and tidy code that these things are taken into account. Now, one of the things I can do here is come into CodeRush, into the tool windows, and have a look at my metrics. And I can see across the whole project how healthy my code is based on the maintenance complexity or the number of lines in the code. So really, really cool tools all inside the IDE for what we want to do. Now I understand that it's a bit of a whirlwind and there's a lot of things that some stuff you might already know, some you might be seeing for the first time, but there is just so much power that DevExpress are introducing into the IDE to make our lives as developers a lot easier. So Amanda, how are we going for questions?
Hey Paul, we currently don't have any questions.
I think that's a good thing or not. Anybody have any questions? While people are thinking, There's been a great email blast go out recently about the live classroom training courses that we're running across the world. We've got some in Europe and some in America coming up. If you're wanting a classroom style session, it is definitely worth looking into. The courses that we're offering are second to none. Shameless plug.
Well, hey, yeah, we do. We've got WinForms training coming up in New York, March 19th through the 21st. ASP.NET in New York, March 24th through the 26th. And a reporting training class, April 21st through the 24th, here in the Los Angeles offices.
And beautiful offices they are too.
Have you ever been here, Paul?
Oh, Amanda, yes, I have.
All right, we did have a couple of questions that came in from Mark. Which power tools would you recommend turning off that interfere with CodeRush?
When you say power tools, I tend not to have anything other than CodeRush installed. I don't run any other Visual Studio extensions. There is obviously a lot of tweaking you can do inside CodeRush. There's a lot of different options you can set in there. And what I would definitely recommend if you are getting more into CodeRush, there are a couple of really quick webinars that Mark and I did last year that go through some of those settings.
Okay. Does CodeRush have anything built in to help with MVC?
Does CodeRush have anything built in to help with MVC? Short answer is yes. Long answer is yes. When it comes to, let me just switch over to an instance of Visual Studio. There is so much inside CodeRush when it comes to templating. I mean, I haven't even touched the surface of what it's capable of today. The key elements here, switch to an expert user in the bottom left-hand corner here inside the options, and spend 10-15 minutes just going through. Even you could spend that long just going through some of the templates that are inbuilt. Let's go up here. I was looking at some the other day. The ability to shortcut your coding, and even if you find that there's something that you think should be out of the box, you've got the ability of writing your own templates, and it is just a breeze. One of the ones that I tend to help developers with is simple things, creating a structure for implementing a command reader inside SQL, and I turn what would be a dozen lines of code into 3 keystrokes, and it just saves a ton of time when you're doing things like that. But come into templates and search for things that you're typing frequently, or things like that, and certainly spend a little bit of time just stepping through some of the other things in here. There's so much. Some of it you can turn off, definitely. There's, when it comes to the visual experience, or looking at some of the what's the word I'm looking for here, the hinting, where you might think, oh, those billboards are starting to affect, I know what I'm doing. You can come in and turn them off. You can reset them. The whole idea with CodeRush is it can be as unobtrusive as you want, or as in your face as you want, but for a couple of minutes a day, your productivity will go through the roof.
All right, everybody. Again, thank you to Paul for presenting, and thank you all for joining us. Just a reminder, when you do exit this webinar, you will see a very short survey, 1 question. Please take a second to comment. We do truly appreciate it. And thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.